Goodbye.
One turned into a crap show there in the 70s. Any of that crap in it because all those inserts don't exist anymore?
Alright guys, we're starting on the Batpod build, as we just finished off the 2 Batman builds, and now we're going to build the Batpod so we can combine these builds all together, and this should be a lot of fun. This is the Moebius models. See, I pronounced it correctly this time. Assembly instructions, so let's just take a quick look at that, and we'll see what it takes to put this Batpod together. It is not the most difficult kit in the world, not really super parts heavy, but you can see here that it is very detailed. Let's just take a quick look at these instructions here. You can see the frame halves, the 2 halves of the frame go together, all these bits and pieces that build up the entire chassis of the Batpod. And then, of course, we have those massive tires going together. We even have brakes. We have our guns. I mean, this is going to be a really interesting build. And then the last page of the instructions. It's all just final assembly, putting all the sub-assemblies together. And then what's really cool is that in the back of the instructions, they give you a breakdown of the bike, telling you exactly what everything is. And then you have a color guide here. A little bit of a history on the Batpod. Guess if you guys want to read that, you can freeze frame on that. It's interesting and worth a read. And then we have, of course, our range of products from Moebius concerning the Dark Knight Batman and the Batpod. So all in all, pretty simple build, which consists of basically just these 2 trees and the 2 tires. Now, one thing I have to say is that this is a really clean, sharp, and crisp mold. I mean, look at how sharp everything is. This is as clean as anything from Tamiya, Fujimi, some of the Asian manufacturers. It's just very sharp. That means very little, if any, flash at all. On the kit itself, there's a little bit right here in the center, which, of course, we're not going to worry about on the runner. We care about whether it's on the flash or not. I mean, on the parts or not. Look at the handlebars. I mean, this is some really clean molding. And then you get a little Moebius model's faceplate plate here, which is pretty cool. Now let's take a look at, sorry about that, but the dehumidifier just kicked on. Take a look at this engine. I mean, the chassis work on that. Look at how clean that is. Hold on, guys. Let me just shut that off. Alright, now take a look at some of the detail here. Here's the chassis. More of the front components of the vehicle. Look at the foot pedals. I mean, they really, really did an amazing job with the molding and on this kit. There you go, the guns. I am really, really, really pleasantly surprised, because even though the Batman kit itself, we'll take a quick look at it, was really nicely detailed and nicely molded, it was nowhere near as crisp or as sharp as this bike is. But it is the Batman kit itself that actually look really, really cool. So, let's take a look at the tires here. We got some nice tread on the tires. There's soft rubber, hollowed. Very, very cool. So we're going to get started on that, and we're going to start with our sub-assemblies, and then we're going to move on to paint. So come along for the ride on this. Okay, guys, we're getting started on the bat pod. We already got the two frame halves cut out, so we're going to take a look at these as we're putting them together. And as we're listening in the background, we're just sitting here watching Snarky J Cosplay, which is a really cool pop culture channel. I really like her stuff. She's a cosplayer and she's really cool. Very interesting every time she's on screen. Anyway, let's get back to this. Alright guys, we're going to take a look at the two frame halves here. Now, as I stated before, how cool the detailing is. But the one thing I wanted to point out to you is that it's got these nubs that are on each piece from the tree, such as this one here, which they actually look like they might be part of the model. But judging by what I'm seeing on the instruction sheet, they should be cut off. We're looking at that L-shaped one there, this one here, and this one here. As when I look on the instructions, I'll put the instructions up right here. For the picture of the frame, none of them have these parts on them, so we're going to snip them off and hope that we're not cutting off something important. That one actually looks like it is something. That one is not. That one is not. Okay, that one actually is a part of the kit. Okay, guys, just want to point out that this one here is actually a part of the kit. It forms this tube that runs through the frame. Not really sure what it's for yet, but don't cut that one off. The other ones look like we're good to go. You don't... Oh, okay, there it is. I see it in the diagram now. Let me put it up here. I'm going to point this out to you guys. Okay, if you notice, most of their parts have these nubs that need to get cut off, which you can easily mistake for being part of the kit. If you take a look at this one here, again, even the nubs are so sharply and crisply cast that you would think it's part of the detail of the kit. Okay, the oil tank here, we're going to have to clean up the mold lines on here. Okay guys, that involves quite a bit of sanding, but I think I've got most of the seams where I want them now. And I'm not really sure what's going to be covered and what isn't on this build yet, so I may have to do a little more seam work if any of them show. So we're just winging it right now. Alright guys, if you're like me, you're going to be in a hurry, in a rush, and not really read through the instructions, and you're going to decide, I'm just going to put the frame halves together because I want to see how they look, because they really looks really cool, and it does. And then you're going to realize, oh, you just screwed up because you didn't read the instructions. If you had, you would have realized that they wanted you to glue the engine half to the left side frame rail, frame first, before you glue the two of them together. There's a good reason for that. You see this little bracket right here. You cannot put this in because it's got two small bolt heads that are supposed to slot in behind that little bracket and the one that used to be there that I cut off in order to install the engine half, because the engine half has one keyed opening here which goes on to the keyed pin there, if you guys can see that. And basically you're supposed to slot this in behind that bracket there and install it to the pin here on the inside of the engine. Of course, I didn't do that because I didn't read the instructions. So what I did was I sliced off this bracket here, and I'm going to install this, hopefully, if I can squeeze it through the other, past the other bracket, because I was really in a hurry and I kind of wanted to just see how it all went together. Yeah, there we go. So we're almost in, and now we're in. We're gonna have to do a lot of gluing to fix that. And you can see how it fits behind that bracket. Well, there's another bracket right up here, the one that I cut off, which now I'm going to have to glue back on. Because your boy don't read instructions. Don't need no stinking instructions.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
So we're going to do that, and then the frame will be ready for paint. Okay, I'll give you guys a really good look at this. You can see this is the little bracket that I sliced off. Has some really good, nice detail on there. That is going to go right on that bolt head there. And then get glued right down to the frame there. So it really will be a separate bracket. Maybe I should paint that separately. And then glue it on. I don't know. Alright, so that's going to be an easy repair. And that's going to be our finished frame and motor assembly, except for the oil tank, which I'm painting separately. Alright guys, now we're starting on continuing with the chassis assembly. We're going on to step 1B, which is to continue assembling the chassis, and we're going to be assembling the front chassis connector tube to the horizontal connector to a large air tank. The instructions aren't always really clear on exactly what you have to do with this kit. So if you'll see piece number 34, which is the assembled, well, piece number 34 and 35, which assemble into the front chassis tube upper half and lower half. And they have to go attached to piece number 15, which is the front chassis horizontal connector. Now, what it doesn't tell you, or doesn't make really clear, so if you guys are going to build this kit, I just want to show you guys, is that there is a mechanically keyed slot for these pieces to go together. So you really can't get them wrong. You can see there how it's slotted, and it goes right into the keyway there. So this, you really can't get this wrong, but if you do try and force it, you can damage it. So this is basically what you're going to get when you're assembled. So we're going to put a little bit of Tamiya glue on here and seal that up right there. Now I did clean up some of the seams on this part. You're not going to see too much of it, so you don't really have to go crazy. But this is your assembled front part of the chassis. Now this gets glued in. We already talked about the chassis and the issue I had with the engine because I don't read directions and I really should.
You got that right.
But this is the front of the chassis here, and this tube is going to slot into the chassis right here like so. Now the thing is that they tell you to cement this front chassis tube connector to the chassis, but it doesn't really have any sort of keyway here to tell you exactly how to mount it and where to glue it in place. So unless it no, see, so this actually rotates, so you don't really know where to aim this or what angle to glue it down. So I would recommend that you don't do this until you start getting more of the model together, so that you'll see how everything lines up. But in the meanwhile, a lot of this has got to get painted, and I'm going to be using tons of metallic tones here. So I'm not going to really be assembling anything just yet. The next piece that goes on is piece number 9, which is this air tank, which I do want to paint separately before I put it on. And that attaches right to there. Why? I don't know, but it does. So we're not going to attach that just yet. So we'll have portions of our assembly completed, which is this front piece here. I've got to start looking up some reference photos to see what goes where. Our engine, which is going to be a slightly different color. The chassis itself is going to be black. So that's all going to be done with black primer. The engine I want to be a lighter metallic shade so that it kind of stands out. Then these brackets are going to be other metallic shades. We're going to be doing other different things here because we want all of this detail work to really stand out because it's a really nicely detailed kit. So that's going to complete step 1B on the build so far. Alright guys, we're right in the middle of the Batman Batpod build, and I just wanted to show you guys a little something. This type of build is usually one where I just stall out sometimes because there are so many different pieces, and everything has really interesting shapes that I want to have stand out in the build to give you a lot to look at. So then it comes a question of what to paint. Now, there is one specific way that this vehicle looks. Well, I mean, we don't really get a great look at it in the movie, but I do have a few references. The first one being the Batpod Special Edition DVD of the Dark Knight movie, which came with this really cool display stand. The DVD is inside of here, and it came with a really cool display of the Batpod, which is really, really neat. Now, this has given me some inspiration on some of the paintwork, the way I want to see the Batpod go. As you see, the light and dark tones in it really gives you a lot to look at. Makes it visually interesting where you can look at all the details in the Batpod. Now, it is a simplified version of the Batpod, as it doesn't have all of the pipe work and everything that the model does, even though the model is quite a bit smaller. Then on this side, my other inspiration is my Hallmark ornament Dark Knight Batpod. Now you can see here the Batpod itself is now mostly in grays and metallic tones instead of black, which makes it visually more interesting for the ornament because, let's see if we can get a good look at it here. If it was just a black Batpod with Batman in black all on top of it, it'd just be one big mess of black. Whereas here you can see the tires stand out, the chassis in gray stands out against the metallic tones. So it really does look cool, and it's interesting to look at. May not be 100% accurate, but it is really interesting to look at, and that's my goal, is to have the model just be so interesting to look at that you don't really worry about being 100% accurate. And since I've already changed Batman into the gray suit, because again, I think it just looks much more visually interesting than the black suit. Now I've got to decide what I'm going to do with the bat pod. I've already started to assemble the chassis. Now there's all sorts of pipe work that goes along with it, with brackets really nicely detailed. So I want some of that to stand out against the dark of the chassis. So what I'm thinking of, and I'm still molding all of this over, is just a black backbone of the chassis. And then the engine's going to be a lighter metallic silvery tone. Haven't decided on which color yet. I've got quite a few to choose from. And then there's going to be a bit of brass and some copper thrown in there, just to make some of the bits and pieces stand out. So that's where I am right now. A little stuck on deciding which way to paint and which way to go. Usually ends up being the hardest part of the build for me, is just getting the colors down to where I want them and trying to make things as visually interesting to my eye, because when I look at them, I love to look at all the small details. So I try to make it as interesting as I can to myself, which in turn will make it interesting to anyone else who sees it, because this hallmark ornament just looks very cool, although it could stand a bit of a wash. And then the DVD display also incredibly cool and very interesting to look at, as you can pick out all the small pieces that are highlighted by the aluminum coloring, and then there's a bit of a wash and a little bit of dry brushing over it, which gives it a slightly worn look. I mean, it's just a really cool looking piece. So those are my influences on this build, so let's just keep going and see what we come up with. Okay guys, this is where the build starts getting fun for me. Once you get past the initial shock of taking parts out and realizing how many parts you have to deal with, and then getting everything ready for paint, once you get into the paint area, that's when the build starts to come alive for me and I start to have a lot of fun. So you saw a little bit of me airbrushing some of the stuff on the bike here, on the bat pod. So now we're going back to our first step. Now this build, I can already tell, is going to require a lot of back and forth between the building and the paint booth, as I'm still working out on everything I want on this. So I'm just taking it one step at a time, and I'll build and paint as I go along. So here we have the bat pod. The chassis is done in magnesium from Vallejo. The engine is done in dark aluminum from Vallejo because I wanted the engine and the chassis to have slightly different look. So that's why I went with these two colors. I didn't want to do the chassis in black because just plain black, I mean, for me, I just found that a little dull. So the magnesium actually gives it a nice metallic tone and really works out nicely. And then with the engine sitting there in the dark aluminum, it just kind of sets it up. The contrast just kind of works for me. Now I'm going to be adding some other metallic tones. Like I'm working right now with my Mr. Hobbies Mr. Metallic color. I'm using the blue gold because let me just show you some of the really interesting detail they put into this kit. Now this is a part. This is the one half of the engine. Now one thing you're never really going to see is this gearing that's inside the engine. This is pretty cool. This is part of the transmission. And I decided to paint that with the blue gold just to give it another metallic color in there. You're probably never going to see this when the model's together, but it's pretty cool that they did put that in there. So I just gave it a quick brush up of some gold. You may be able to see the teeth there. So hopefully that'll show, because that's a neat little detail. So we're going to get to working with more of the details here and working on step 1A to finish putting the chassis and the engine and the oil tank together. Alright guys, been working on this for a little while, and here we have the partially assembled chassis for the Bat Pod. Now, as you can see, I did decide to forego the all black paint scheme more in favor of a combination of the two inspirations that I have here. But I decided to do everything in metallic tones because I really wanted to have as much visible detail and as much visual interest as I could, as this is a really mechanical looking. It's just really interesting to look at all the bits and pieces that go into this. I mean, this thing does have a lot of detail for such a small model, and for something with so few parts, it really comes together nicely and really has a lot of angles and doodads and gadgets and widgets and greebles to look at while it's being built. So I'm having a lot of fun putting this together. And I am discovering one thing, that there's a lot of places where all that seam work that I did really doesn't matter because most of it's going to be covered over with body work. As you can see, the seam on the engine won't be visible once all the body work is attached. And the problem I had with the bracket there, because I didn't read the instructions, you can see now both engine brackets are on, and motor mounts are on and holding the engine in place. We have all sorts of metallic colors. I mean, these are all the paints that I'm using so far to build this little thing. And the build process is interesting. One of the criticisms, as much as I like this model, that I have to give Moebius is in their instructions, as the angles they show the parts in not exactly the most helpful, as it doesn't really show you what goes where. It tells you in what order it goes together. And as you can see, we've gone through step 1A, 1B, and we're currently on step 1C. And it shows the chassis in the exact same orientation in all three steps. It's not really that helpful, especially when you have to attach something on the other side of the chassis. Now I'm looking at step 1D. I've already checked into the parts, and where the lower steering bar goes together doesn't really make sense until you start going past step 1C and seeing how the rest of it goes together. So you're going to have to do a lot of trial and error fitting before you glue things down. Now, one thing about the front end of this bike is that I haven't glued this in place. This front, what did they call this? This front chassis horizontal connector. This is where the front wheel is going to go attached. I haven't glued this in place so it still swivels, because this has attached to it is this bar here. The left side brace attaches to that, and also the shock absorber here attaches to that with two brackets that I still have to paint. So you can't really cement this in place without knowing exactly where everything else is going to sit, because you don't know if you'll have it at the right angle. It's something you got to look out for. But overall, guys, I got to tell you, this is really cool looking. And especially in all of these metallic colors. I mean, if you choose to do it all in black, that's cool, because that's actually more screen accurate than what I'm doing. But this just looks so mechanical and so, I mean, it just looks cool. I mean, I'm really, really loving it. So can't wait to continue with this build. So I'm gonna keep going. Alright guys, we're here on the build, and right now we're working, well, we're back to work on the Batman Batpod, which is coming out really, really cool. I mean, that just looks cool. Don't mind the noise. I have my 3D printer going there as I'm finally learning how to use it. And I've got it printing something for about the 10th time, and hopefully I get it right this time. So we might put a live video camera on this so you guys can watch it come together if you're really bored and want to watch that kind of stuff. But right now we're here to talk about something a little more on topic with this Batpod. And that's this steering gear assembly on the Batpod. If you see this part here, this is what they call the lower steering bar. Now you see this peg right now. Let me see if I can zoom in here. There we go. Now you see that peg right there. That peg is supposed to go into the steering link here, or what they call the steering connector. Now there's supposed to be another peg on the other side of this steering bar, but all we have here is a little nub, because that is supposed to go into the underside of the bike itself. And that little nub there is in no way a secure mounting point. But the weird thing is, when you look at the instructions, and I'm going to put them up right here, they show the long pin on the other side as being where this little bump is, and that pin is supposed to be inserted into the bike, which really makes no sense, because that pin on the other side is where the steering gear goes. So it looks to me like they made a mistake when they molded this part and they didn't include the pin on the top. So we're going to correct that, and I'm going to show you how. So let's switch back to our workshop view. Okay guys, we're back here on the Batpod build, and just been wrecking my head on what to do with this part here. Now what I decided what I am going to do is I'm going to drill out the rear area here where it looks like there should be a peg and it's not there, because according to the instructions, which I'll put them up here again, this is supposed to peg into the bottom of the Batpod body itself, and it's supposed to peg in right here for the steering assembly, and then the steering arm goes attached to it. But as you can see, there's no peg there for it to fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill it out, and I'm going to install my own peg there, because the only peg on this part is the one on the opposite side, which is for the steering arm. But we've already gone over that. So I'm just going to drill out this small hole here and install a small peg on it, and then we're going to install it into the bat pod. After that, I'm just going to use my pin vise and drill right into the part. Now, I don't know if anyone else has run into this building this kit. I've tried watching a few videos, and there's not a lot out there on this kit. So I don't know if it's a problem anyone else has run into, or if it's just mine. Maybe it just wasn't molded right. But it's an easy enough fix, as long as this thing fits in the direction it's supposed to. So there we go. We're dead center, drilling right into the part. Want to give a nice depth to the hole so that when we put our peg in, it'll have a nice solid depth in which to glue it in, and it'll be nice and it'll be really super secure. Okay, so I think that is going to be good right there. Now, I've looked over the instructions several times, and this seems to be pretty much the only solution to this issue. So there we go. Now we have our hole drilled, and we're ready for installation of the peg. So we'll get a little piece of styrene rod. Let's see if we can find one in the right diameter. I found the right diameter, and there we go. It's just about perfect, and it'll fit right into the hole, dead center. So we'll have to just enlarge the hole a little bit more. Now we just have to make sure that we have the rod straight. And that looks good there. So now we'll just let that solidify, and hopefully that will solve our problem, and we'll be able to continue with this build, because until I get that sorted out, I can't really go any further other than assembling the sub-assemblies, which I have primed today, and hoping that this works. Alright guys, now let's try and fit our new pin here and see how we do. And it is a perfect fit for the steering gear. Yep, that fits exactly the way I wanted it to. So now that it stays there, we'll see how the steering arm goes attached. So the only part of the kit that's really been somewhat troublesome let's see. Now the steering arm also fits one way better than it does another way, so we're trying to make sure we got it right. Okay guys, now we're working on the gun pods on each side of the bat pod. And I just wanted to show you what I'm doing with these. This is what you get right out of the kit. Let's see if we can focus on that. There we go. You can see how the barrel is molded, but it looks like it's got a plug in it, as the tip of the barrel is split. But you see that there? I'm hoping you guys can see that. So that's filled in. This gets as part of the mold process. But I do know from looking at some of the other models of this and looking at the film itself that this is a gun barrel that should be open. So what I did was I just cut out all the material within that split right there at the end of the barrel and then drilled a hole in it. And this is the result. Let's see, can we focus in on that? We now have a split gun barrel. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but in there, the barrel is actually drilled out. So it gives it a much more of a realistic appearance. And I kind of like it. So now it's time to work on the other side. Now, I accomplished this just by cutting out most of the material with my hobby knife. And then using my drills, my pin vise, and my microfiles to just clean the whole thing up. So I'm going to get started on the other one. You guys don't really need to watch me doing that because, I mean, really what's exciting about that. And we'll be back with the finished product. Alright guys, here's a quick video on how to make your tire treads appear a little more realistic. Here we have the tire from the bat pod. I've attached it to a 12mm socket because that's what fits the diameter of the tire. Gives it a nice snug fit. Put it in our drill. Run it across a piece of sandpaper, a heavy grip. And you see it starts to put wear on the tread area. And boom, it gives you a much more realistic appearance to your tire, where the contact surfaces are worn from where they've been hitting the ground. And then you can just put as much wear on it as you like. And boom. Nice realistic wear on your tires. Very quick, very easy. Right here we have one of our sub-assemblies, which is the rear wheel and hub assembly, or I mean just the rear part of the chassis for the bat pod. And I just kind of wanted to show it to you because I'm really happy with the way this turned out. You can see how all the different metallic tones, which I've used, kind of changes the look of the bat pod, but I really like how mechanical it looks now. I mean, it just looks like, I don't know, to me it just it looks more real. If that's the best way I can explain it, if that makes any sense. But I really love the gold tones. I got a few other different metallic colors in there, just to bring a bit of it more to life. I mean, it really makes it look like there's a lot more parts in there than there actually are. And there are quite a few parts in here. I mean, this is even though it looks like it's not a very parts-heavy kit, it is for its size. Now, what I wanted to talk about was a couple of the assembly issues that this has. This kit, especially the instructions, is not the most user-friendly kit ever. You got to kind of try to figure where they want you to put certain things. All right, this is the rear brake pedal, and it slots right here into the chassis member, but it's not really clear on exactly where they want you to place this. So when you're building this kit, you're going to want to make sure that the brake pedal rests right at the bottom of the footrest on the back portion of the chassis. Now this footrest, if you look at the instructions, which I'll put up right here, is part of the radiator assembly, which again goes mounted straight onto the chassis next to where they put the brake, what is that? The rear brake cylinder. Now, one thing I did take note of was I wasn't really sure if it would make any difference about painting the brakes or not, because I wasn't even sure if they'd be really visible when I looked at the wheels until I assembled it all. And now I'm glad I did paint it, because you can actually see the brake disc in the back. It's a really nice detail in that. Now I painted that with my all-clad paints, which gives it a really nice metallic tone. And then the gold for the caliper is my Mr. Metal Color Blue Gold, which has become my favorite goldish toned metallic color. Now, the rest of the assembly is painted with the Vallejo. This was Vallejo Steel, I think it was. I think it was Vallejo Steel. And no, I'm sorry. The chassis was in Vallejo Magnesium. All of that is Vallejo Magnesium. The gold tones are with the Mr. Hobby Blue Gold. And then the copper color is my Citadel Phalanx Gold, which just adds another little metallic tone to toss in there. And I think that all of it comes together, really gives you a great rear chassis. Not quite movie accurate, as the movie version was just all black. But I think this looks, for me, it looks much better because it's much more interesting to look at. Now we're going to start putting the front together. And we're going to start with, this is the left side munitions cluster. Here you can see the guns. I've put a little bit of a singe mark on it using my T041 paint, which I got at Gundam Planet. Not really sure who made it, but it just really gives a nice singed effect. So the barrel's burned. So now we're going to start assembly. And let's put it together, and then we'll talk about the whole assembly when it's done. Oh, here we have our CO2 cartridges. I just wanted to show you that. That's also done with the all-clad polished aluminum. And the all-clad is a very versatile paint because you can make quite a few different tints of metallic. You can make quite a few different metallic tints using the all-clad based just on how you spray it or how many layers you put on, as it can go anywhere from a really shiny chrome to what I was looking for here, which is just a nice aluminum finish. And then again, I used my Mr. Hobby Blue Gold to paint in some of the details. You have a tab on the back. So you're not going to go in this way. You're going to go in this way. Now you have to make sure you get the tab in the slot. In order for this to sit properly. And there we go. So you can see the tab there and where it slots right into the munitions cluster. So the instructions do show you pushing it in that way, but they don't really mention anything about the tab. It's kind of something you got to make note of. Now guys, when you're installing the brakes, make note of the tab here, and that goes into the slot there, as they are mechanically keyed to each other. Alright guys, another thing you're going to have to be aware of is the instructions don't really tell you which direction the tire's got to face. So if you're holding the left munitions cluster with the brake on it, you've got to install the tire with the long shaft on it toward the left side and the short one toward the right. And that'll allow the tire to go all the way in and cover and fit all the way down on the axle. So remember, the long shaft goes to the left. The instructions don't make any mention of that at all. Alright guys, and here we have our whole front sub-assembly completed. How it's going to attach to the bike itself, I don't know yet. We're going to figure that out. Alright guys, just wanted to point out that this is also mechanically keyed to the rear portion of the frame. And this is almost like a hexagon shape as opposed to just a round shaft. So you can put it in there and don't worry too much because it will slot right in and you will have it perfectly aligned, the rear of the chassis with the front. Okay, now we have to attach the front, which is going to be a little more difficult, as the front is going to slot into this. If you look on the back of the frame here, there is a slot here and a tab here that goes into that slot. But at the same time you're doing that, you have to make sure you install this tab on the bottom of the front fork that goes into this slot right here on the bottom of the frame. So basically, let's do a little trial fit there. Whoop. This is a tricky little thing. Okay, so that is going to be how that's going to fit there. Alright, so this is all going to come down to your glue bond. Here, I would definitely suggest using a good super glue here, because you don't want this to come apart on you. Now, the lower section is not going to be the part that really holds the bike. It's going to be the upper frame, the upper fork here. Now, you want to make sure you have the bike lined up straight so that it doesn't look goofy. And then you want to let it sit there and dry. There you go. Okay guys, we're getting down to the finish line on the Batpod build, and I just want to bring a couple things to your attention as you're putting this thing together. First of all, it's very, very finicky to go together. And to line everything up straight and have everything fit, it is quite a bit tricky. Let me tell you what I ran into now as far as difficulties in this kit. Now, the first thing is you got to make sure you have everything lined up perfectly straight between the front and the rear. I did not. And after I had everything glued in and put together, I noticed that my front tire is turned in a little bit more than my rear. Doesn't look horrible. It looks like he's about to lean into a turn. So I'm good with that because I'm probably going to put it on a base that shows it leaning as if he's about to make a turn as he's going into battle or whatever it is that Batman's doing. And getting everything in here to line up perfectly, again, very, very tricky. As they are the way this thing is built, it's held together in very, very weak joints. Which is probably one of the reasons that the real vehicle was so difficult to drive. But it does build up really nice. I'm really happy with the way it's turning out. I haven't attached this permanently yet because I'm trying to decide whether I really want to or not. Because when you remove it, you get to see such beautiful detail, like that shock that's in there that connects to the front, all the brackets and linkages and everything in there. And it just seemed to me to be kind of a shame to permanently cover it with the fairing here in the seat. So I may just leave that as removable so that if I want to display it with everything off, I can, and you can see all that really nice detail that's in there. Now, one of the bigger issues that I've had with this kit is the handlebars or armrests, the controllers for the Batpod. This model is meant to be used along with the Batman riding model from their other Dark Knight kit. Now, individually, this kit looks fantastic. I mean, I really love the way it looks, especially in this metallic hue that I've decided to paint it as opposed to being all black. Really loving the way that it looks. But if you want to have it fit your Batman, there are going to be some issues. They say that you should attach the arm controllers to his arms before you install the kit, before you install Batman onto the seat, if you're building both. I can't see how that would possibly work, because when you try and line everything up, Batman does not line up perfectly with everything on the bike in order to make that fit, and his hands hold the controller, hold the handlebars, while fitting this onto his arm and then having it fit into the bike here on the steering assembly. I've been trying and just no way I can make that fit. You would have to take this and completely redesign this part, which I was considering doing with some metal rod, because I just couldn't make that work the way I wanted it to. Now, part of the reason may be because I'm not even sure if the steering linkage here that I've installed here is installed in the correct orientation, because the instructions are very vague about that and don't seem to match up exactly with the part as I've stated previously in this video. So I think I have it right, but it could also be the other way around, which could give you a completely different result. I am not sure. I tried it one way and it just kind of stuck there. So what I've decided to do was, after I painted and detailed the handlebars and the controllers here, the brake mechanism and everything, which is a really nicely detailed part, I've decided that I'm just going to put the controllers in Batman's hands. And when you put him on the bike, the arm will sit close enough to the controller so that it'll give you the look you're going for. Is it going to be 100% correct? No. But I did find, with a little bit of test fitting, at least of one arm, that it will sit close enough that it gives you the look that if there's something connecting that handlebar to that arm there. Yeah. Is it perfect? No. Am I going to sit here and rebuild this whole thing, redesign this whole thing? Yeah, I decided I wasn't going to do that. I had a lot of fun building this kit. But I decided I am just not going to do that. This is going to be fun to display on the shelf. either with Batman on it or without, as it really is just a fantastic looking model. But I am not gonna go as far as redesigning this whole part here. Maybe if I get another one, which I probably will, because I want to try and build one in a slightly different color scheme. Even though I love this all metallic color scheme that I decided to use on this one. I mean, it just really looks just like, you know, heavy metal. I really like it. Let's just put. I still have to touch up the seat, but if we put the fairing back on it, I mean, just look at that. That thing just screams metal to me. Love the way it turned out. So anyway, those were the last couple things that I have to do before final assembly and the reveal. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this stuff together and put Batman on there, and then we'll be back for the final reveal. Alright guys, that's going to bring this build to a close. And I'm going to give you my final review and rating on this kit. Now, let me start by saying that it's just a really good looking kit. It's a great build, but it does have its issues. The primary problem being the instructions. They're not very clear. They only show the bike from one angle, which really doesn't give you a proper view on how certain things go together, such as the steering gear, which is my biggest issue with this kit. The steering gear doesn't seem to fit properly. The two arm guards that are supposed to be attached to the handlebars that Batman has in his hands, they just don't reach. And unless you're gonna scratch build your own, I couldn't find any way to make them fit the way they're supposed to. So that is a definite issue with this kit. Now, scratch building some wouldn't be that difficult, and if it really bugs me, I may end up doing it anyway. But right now, I'm really happy with the way this kit looks. The molding is crisp, it's clean, there's very little flash. You do have to clean up some mold lines, but it's just crisp and clean. It kind of reminds me of the Warhammer kits, if you guys have ever built those, where they put a lot of parts on just a few screws. And they're very small, spindly parts. So this kit is not, I would say, for a beginner. I would recommend this to someone who's built a few kits beforehand that deal with a lot of small, finicky detail parts. And then putting it together can also be a little bit tricky. So that being said, pros on this kit, it looks fantastic when put together. And when you put Batman on it, it just looks even better. But even without Batman, it's a great looking kit. It really represents the bikes well. And it's just looks great sitting on the shelf. Cons. The aforementioned instructions, which are a big hit on this kit. It really makes things more difficult than they need to be. Some of the parts, such as the arm guards and the handlebars, just don't fit the way they're supposed to. And the steering gear, again, going back to those instructions, it's just a big issue that I found with this kit. So, that being said, I'm going to give it my rating. And my rating right now for this kit it's a tough one because I really like the final result. But it's just that they made it way more difficult than it needs to be. And the instructions really are an issue with this kit. So I'm going to give this kit a 6.9. Just based on the few issues that the kit does have. Does it mean it's a bad kit? No. It definitely means it is not a kit for beginners. It is not something that you want to start your modeling career with. But if you have built a few kits and you've got some experience under your belt, I recommend it because it really does look great. And depending on how you paint it, I went with this all metallic scheme. It just gleams. So that's going to be it. 6.9. Wish I could rate it higher, but the instructions really are detrimental to this kit. Moebius, if you're listening, fix them. Okay, guys, see you on the next one.